The 2025 NHL offseason was kind of one to forget, but over the course of a few months, we still got a bunch of trades that honestly, a month into the NHL season, are looking fascinating. So I wanted to go back and regrade every single one of the major trades that we saw over the summer to see how they've aged up to this point. So make sure you guys watch till the end as we go through all the major trades to see which teams have come out on top so far, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this every single weekday all throughout the year. Now we're going to go through the trades from earliest to latest in the offseason, and we're going to start out with one that I think has aged really interestingly, and that is the Artur Silovs trade. Silovs has never been a household name, but has been one of the better goaltenders in the NHL this year. After being a former 6th-round pick by the Canucks, he was somebody that wasn't really fitting within that system, as Demko and Lankinen were already signed long-term, but was putting up great numbers in the AHL, including a great run to the Calder Cup final where he had a .931 save percentage in 24 games. I always thought there was an NHL job for Silovs that just never came with the Canucks. But Pittsburgh didn't really give up that much, giving away a 2027 4th-round pick and former 1st-rounder Shea Stillman, who I don't think is much of a player at all. And for table scraps, Pittsburgh was able to get a really good goaltender here. So far through 9 games, has a .916 save percentage, is currently 6th among all NHL goalies in goals saved above expected. In terms of the trade grades, I'm going to give the Pittsburgh Penguins an A+, great movement by them, and for the Canucks, a D-. It's not an F exactly, because I don't think Silovs quite had the value this last summer that he would have now, but still, I think the asset management was just a bit poor. Moving on to a big one-for-one in the prospect landscape this last summer, we go into a big trade between the Oilers and the Tampa Bay Lightning, where the Oilers acquired Isaac Howard in exchange for Sam O'Reilly. Now, at the time, the value was evident for the Oilers, getting somebody that could be a potential top 6 piece, but I did still like Sam O'Reilly quite a bit here, and obviously Howard wasn't going to sign in Tampa Bay. O'Reilly, I think, has always been a pretty underrated prospect. He always puts in great dirty work, especially on the boards. Just such a battler there, and has some good in-tight skill against pressure that I think will end up translating. I don't think he'll be much more than a 3rd-line forward, but a pretty good one in that role. And Isaac Howard's time in the NHL hasn't been perfect by any means. He's had some issues in terms of the ice time, but has only 2 goals and 3 points through 16 games. Defensively, has had some icky moments, but Edmonton just doesn't really seem to want to give much of an opportunity to him. I still think Howard will eventually turn the page, but I don't think it's as much of a slam dunk as it initially seemed to be. So I'm going to give this trade a B- for Edmonton and a straight C for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Onto a big defensive trade here. We go into the big deal between the Canes and the New York Rangers, where the Carolina Hurricanes acquired K'Andre Miller. In exchange, the Rangers got Scott Morrow on the prospect side, as well as a conditional 1st-round pick and 2026 2nd-rounder. I would say this trade at the time looked pretty even, and I would still say so, though K'Andre Miller offensively in the games he's played has looked pretty good, getting 2 goals and 8 points through 9 games. As far as I've seen, I don't think Miller's defensive game has quite taken the step I think it's needed to have, but at the same time, if he's producing like he's producing, I don't think it's much of a problem. I still think eventually Miller will be able to rebound from those issues, but he's always had some issues in terms of processing the game and making those quick decisions defensively that I think continue to haunt him just a tad bit. On the Rangers side, it seemed like K'Andre Miller wasn't much of a fit anymore, and I do think they got a decent haul for him considering the picks. And Scott Morrow, I do think, still is a future NHLer, though similarly to K'Andre Miller, has some processing issues defensively that do need to be worked out, and in the AHL hasn't lit the world on fire either, just 2 points through 9 games. In terms of the trade grades, I do think Carolina especially has the advantage here, and also considering a lot of the value here for the Rangers is picks, and they haven't exactly been the greatest at developing their younger prospects, so it's a bit of a crapshoot, while the Canes have something pretty tangible here, and hopefully formative for their defense. Let's go on to a bit of a crazy one from the offseason with the Zach Bolduc for Logan Mailloux 1-for-1. At the time, I thought this was a pretty major win for the Montreal Canadiens, and even though Bolduc hasn't been especially consistent for the Habs this year, even then, I still think it's a massive win for them. I think Bolduc will always be a solid power play player, and with the right players around him, can get some pretty good results. So far through 15 games, has 6 points and 4 goals through 15. He was really good to start out the season, and has cooled off quite a bit recently. But if Bolduc's always a 20-goal, 40-point type of player, I think that's a pretty good ad, considering what the Montreal Canadiens gave up, which I don't think is that much. I've made it no secret that I'm not a big fan of Logan Mailloux's game. I'm not typically somebody that loves defensemen that are only offensive and just complete craters defensively, but that's always kind of been what Logan Mailloux is. He has some good dangles, can be good in the power play, but this year, 0 points through 9 games, a -12, one of the worst players, and you could argue maybe the worst player in the NHL this season so far. I still think Mayu has some potential if he's the most sheltered player in your lineup, but that's kind of what he needs to be, because defensively the awareness is not there. He doesn't really use his body. He isn't overtly physical, at least when he's not trying to hit guys and barrel them over. He's just a bit inconsistent in that regard, and I think for the Blues, sending him down to the AHL was the right idea, but I still don't know how much of a future NHLer he actually is, especially when you need to gain coach's trust. Mayu just hasn't been able to do that. For the trade grades, I'm going to give Montreal a straight B here, with the Blues getting a D+. I think Mayu could eventually turn the page, but I don't think he's ever going to come close to Bolduc's value, even at his lowest. Onto a trade that barely got any attention in the offseason, we go into the Victor Arvidsson deal, which is looking pretty good for the Bruins. They got Victor Arvidsson in exchange for just a 2027 5th-round pick, which I understand the cap space was an issue for Edmonton, but still. Arvidsson has played pretty well for this Bruins team so far, and has gotten some pretty good synergy in that top 6, getting 8 points and 5 goals through 17 games. Hasn't been overwhelmingly good, but has been a very solid part of this Bruins offense, and a much-needed bit of depth for them. I'm going to give the trade an A- here for the Bruins and a C for the Oilers. I get they didn't have much of an opportunity or a choice in the matter, but still, I think Arvidsson could have been a useful part of their lineup this year. Onto the Matias Maccelli trade, where the Leafs acquired him from the Utah Mammoth in exchange for a 2027 conditional third. I made it no secret that I'm a big fan of Matias Maccelli in the game and the potential that he provides. I think he's a fantastic playmaker, but maybe doesn't have the right options around him with Toronto, considering that team is a bit slow at times, and especially with his passes, he can kind of galaxy brain things a bit, which I don't think the Leafs have the finishers really that can match him to maximize those results. But still, through 15 games, has 4 goals, 4 assists for 8 points, and is on pace for a much better season. A lot of that has come for the last 4 games where he has 4 points, but it's good to see him starting to get productive here, because I think the potential, the talent is always there. It's just about the consistency that always seems to be the problem. I think it's a pretty fair trade for both, though. He wasn't going to get much of an opportunity for Utah, so I'm going to give the Leafs here a B- and the Utah Mammoth a straight C. Onto a big goalie trade from the offseason, where the Red Wings acquired John Gibson from the Ducks in exchange for Peter Mrazek, a 2027 second-rounder, and a 2026 fourth-rounder. This one is strange, because Detroit has not really done fantastically playing around Gibson when he has started, and Talbot has looked a bit better in terms of the totals. So far through 9 games, an .882 save percentage. Yikes. He's about average in terms of goal save of expected, but I don't think has taken the pipes over like I think the Red Wings really wanted and, quite frankly, need him to. Now, frankly, Mrazek hasn't exactly lit things up for the Ducks, but I think it's just having another Czech goalie for Lukas Dostal to hang out with, and an .865 save percentage, but a 3-0 record, so the Ducks are just that nasty this year. All in all, it is still maybe a bit better than what the Red Wings had before, but I'm going to give them a straight C on this deal, and the Ducks a C+. Nothing crazy or anything here, but hopefully Gibson can start turning that page. Onto a weird one here in the Jordan Spence deal, where the Ottawa Senators got Spence for a 2025 third and 2026 sixth rounder. And I like this trade a lot for the Sens at the time, meaning some more puck movement on their defense, whereas the Kings are just putting all their eggs into the Brandt Clark basket. Now, Spence hasn't been perfect by any means, but when he has played, I thought he's looked pretty good for the Sens. 7 points in 7 games, has gotten healthy scratch though in like half of the games that Ottawa has played so far, and I don't really understand why. Maybe to a certain extent, he's not the most physical player in the world and makes a couple of interesting decisions here and there, but for the most part, I think he is a net positive for a team that doesn't have as much puck movement as they maybe need without Spence in the lineup. I think they're starting to come around in this game just a little bit more, and that is good to see, so I'm going to give them a C+ for this trade and the LA Kings a C-. I think for the Kings, they could use Spence a bit more, but I understand he wasn't going to be fitting entirely in that lineup. Still, though, I think they could use some more speed on that defense. That's kind of been a bit of the issue. Onto a pretty strange one here. We go into a swap between the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Colorado Avalanche, where the Blue Jackets got Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood in exchange for Gavin Brindley, a 2025 third, and a 2027 conditional second. Now, this trade for me felt a bit desperate for the Blue Jackets kind of wanting to solidify that bottom 6 center spot. I think Coyle has been fine in that role. Started out really good in the offensive department, but has cooled off a bit lately with 9 points in 15 games, and the face-off percentages looking pretty good as well. Miles Wood has been fine. He's been fast, and that's pretty much it. He hasn't even been overly physical or anything. He has like 9 hits through 8 games, which is not really very high even in Columbus's system, but has 4 goals in 9 games. Sure. On the other hand, though, for the Avs, I really like the value at the time for them, getting a bit younger here, getting a few more picks, and Gavin Brindley I thought was a really underrated ad for them. Somebody that I think has always been a bit underrated. Sure, doesn't have the biggest size in the world, but always knows where to go and has a great layer of skill on top of that. And look what he's done so far in the NHL this year with really limited minutes. He's gotten 5 points and 3 goals through 14 games, just recently got an overtime winner, has looked really good recently for them, and just got a recent 2-year extension. He's, to me, somebody that I think could be a pretty nice middle 6 wing option for them and bring some speed that that Avs team is known for, that on top of the picks as well, and I think this trade looks really interesting for the Avs. I would say it's a pretty fine trade across the board. I'm going to give the Blue Jackets here a straight C, but I do think the Avs do get the advantage here with a B- on the deal. Onto a massive one in the Noah Dobson trade, one that we went into a couple weeks ago, and just how interesting and quite frankly great it has been for both sides involved. I think this has been a massive win-win trade for the Montreal Canadiens, getting Noah Dobson, who's been a solidifying presence for them. Hasn't been perfect by any means, but has played a lot of minutes with Mike Matheson, and that pair has been great together, incredibly efficient, and so far through 15 games has 11 points. And with the defensive improvements in his game too, he'll certainly take that. For the Islanders, it didn't seem like Dobson was going to be a core part of that team going forward, so they got Emil Heineman on the forward group, who's been a really good, underrated younger piece for them, who's fitted well into that top 6, getting 10 points and 6 goals through 16 games. And of course, you got the 2 first-round picks with the Islanders using Victor Eklund as well as Kashan Aitchison. Aitchison, by the way, having a monster start to the season, 15 goals in 19 games, on pace for 53 goals as a defenseman. That's just kind of nuts. But I think it was one of the better trades of the offseason. I'm going to give the Montreal Canadiens an A+ on the deal, with the Islanders getting a straight A, though there isn't a massive gap between the two. Both of them won these deals. Onto one that just gets more fascinating by the day. We go on to the JJ Peterka trade, which at the time I thought was really sneaky value for the Sabres, and is another trade that we covered here on the channel a couple weeks back, and just continues to look even more interesting for Buffalo. Now, in Peterka's case, I think he's been decent for the Mammoth. He's been okay, about as advertised, I would say, offensively. On defense, sometimes been a bit icky with his positioning, but on pace for 52 points, and so far is 10 points through 16 games, though 0 over his last 5. Now, Josh Doan was another one that really started the season off hot. Hasn't been as good lately, but I still think he's been putting in a lot of great work, and in 15 games has 9 points, 4 goals, just 1 point shy of what Peterka has done in one less game. And of course, you also got the defenseman in Michael Kesselring, who hasn't been great to start out the season for Buffalo, was injured to start out, which I think kind of put things a little bit funky to start things out, and I would say the last couple of games, him and Byram haven't been a good pair in my opinion whatsoever, so I think he's still kind of finding his way with his line mates and with that Buffalo team, but eventually I think he'll be a very serviceable middle pair defenseman for them, who does a lot of the right things defensively, great skating ability, good first pass, and just is very simple defenseman from the back end. All in all, I still think the Sabres got the most out of anybody here, especially with Peterka not really wanting to stay with that team long term. So I'm going to give them a straight A, and for Utah, a B+. I think Peterka has been a solid fit, though not fantastic by any means. Onto a much bigger steal, though, we go on to the Trevor Zegras trade, where the Flyers acquired Zegras for, of course, Ryan Poehling, and also a 2025 second and a 2026 fourth rounder. Now, at the time, I thought this was ludicrous value and potential here for Philly, but I think it's manifested pretty well for them so far. He's really turned the page up to this point. Through 15 games, has 4 goals, 12 points in 16 games, is back to the fully healthy, fully confident Zegras that is a really good player that I think people kind of forgot about. Now, it is worth mentioning again that it didn't seem like Zegras wanted to stay in Anaheim long term. It didn't really seem like the Ducks had much of a stake in him long term either, trading for guys like Chris Kreider to kind of fill the spots that Zegras would have played otherwise. So it made sense the Ducks traded for him. I just think the value wasn't there. Poehling has been a fine player for the Ducks, and he has 6 points in 15 games, but hasn't really been a fantastic defensive center in my opinion, and face-off wise is around 44% right now, so not even really playing his role perfectly either. And I just don't think the picks were enough for Anaheim to truly justify the trade to begin with. I get it. At the same time, though, I just don't think the value was quite there. I think for the Flyers, it's an A+ trade, and for the Ducks, a D+. Not disastrous, but pretty close. Now, the Ducks went and totally redeemed themselves with the last trade to talk about here in the Chris Kreider deal, which, if Zegras wasn't going to fit long-term, Kreider certainly has fit. Going from the Rangers to the Ducks, I still thought that Kreider was a really interesting bounce-back candidate, but I didn't think he'd be this good. 9 goals and 12 points through 11 games. The Ducks really needed a boost onto their power play, and they absolutely got it. Especially when you consider the Rangers and their issues in scoring, I don't think the value was quite there for them. They only got Carey Terrence and a 2025 third-round pick, and I like Terrence, but I think he'll be a good energy fourth-line center at the very best. To trade a Chris Kreider for that, I think is a pretty brutal blow. Kreider's just been the perfect fit for that Ducks team, though, and that's what I was kind of expecting. Somebody that can sit there, just put in goals, and be in the right positions for a lot of the great playmakers around him, and that's been exactly the role he's fulfilled. I'm going to give the trade an A+ for the Ducks, and honestly, an F for the Rangers. But those are my revisited trade grades from a lot of the major moves of the 2025 offseason, and hopefully you guys did enjoy. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Comment down below your thoughts on all these trades and how you think they've aged up to this point, which you think has aged the best and the worst. And of course, if you want to watch some more videos, you can click on this card for some more trade content. And if you want even more videos, you can become a member here by hitting the join button next to the subscribe button, or hit the link in the description down below. It'll get exclusive videos every single week, plus exclusive member polls to be a part of, and exclusive emoji to use in the comments below. A big shout out to all the current members. Their names will be up here on the screen, but that's pretty much it for me. Make sure you guys have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.